Have you ever really, truly stopped to think about where our ideas about sex and relationships come from? Not just, what you're into, but the deep down rules we all seem to play by without even knowing it. Well, in this explainer, we are diving headfirst into Chris Donaghue's book, Sex Outside the Lines, and it basically takes a sledgehammer to everything we think we know about what's normal. This quote from Nietzsche just nails the whole idea we're going to be talking about. The author's point is that when it comes to sex, we so often lose our own mind, our own real, authentic desires, and we just kind of adopt the group mind. But what if that group mind is the very thing holding us back from what we really want? All right, so the author's whole argument really kicks off by attacking one simple word we use all the time: normal. He says our cultural obsession with being sexually normal is actually the biggest roadblock to real pleasure, real health, and real connection. So what do we even mean by normal sex? Well, the author points to the work of sociologist Gail Rubin, who laid out this pretty specific checklist. And when you look at it, man, it's a narrow path, right? You've got to be straight, married, with one person, to make babies, not for cash, behind closed doors, and, nothing too weird. Does that really sound like it covers everyone? The author's answer is a hard no. And boom, there it is. That's the core thesis in one punchy little sentence. He's saying that trying to squeeze ourselves into that tiny box of normalcy, well, it's literally killing our arousal, our creativity, and our shot at having truly amazing sex. It's a huge claim, and it sets us up to rethink everything. Now, this is where he completely flips the script. Look at this. On the left, norms aren't something to aspire to. They're just a boring average that waters down excitement. But on the right, what society calls deviance gets reframed as something awesome. It's a sign of health, of confidence. It's like a badge of honor that says you know who you are. Okay, so if these norms are so limiting, who's enforcing them? Who are the sex police? The author argues they're actually hiding in plain sight. They're the big institutions we trust to guide us. But they're often boxing us in without us even realizing it. He takes aim at three huge pillars of our society. First, sex ed, which he says usually teaches us to be ashamed and afraid, not curious and joyful. Then, psychology, which he claims can take perfectly healthy desires and label them as a sickness. And finally, marriage. As an institution, he argues it's a broken model that fails people more than it helps them. Whoa. This is probably one of the most intense lines in the whole book. And remember, the author himself is a therapist. He's aiming this fire specifically at the sex addiction industry, arguing that some therapists are acting less like healers and more like moral prison guards, shaming people for things that are just different. To back up his claims about marriage, he just lays out the numbers. And his point is, this isn't about people failing at marriage. He's asking, if any other system or product failed this often, wouldn't you blame the system itself? He argues that the institution of marriage just isn't working for a huge number of people anymore. Now, the critique goes even deeper than our social structures. The author starts to question something way more personal, the whole idea of identity. He argues that the rigid boxes we put ourselves in, like gender and sexuality, aren't just limiting. He says they're basically an illusion. I mean, it's a question that sounds almost silly, right? Male and female, that's it. We learn it in kindergarten. But the author challenges us to look at what biology actually says. And spoiler alert, it's a lot messier and more interesting than that. To make his point, he brings in the work of biologist Anne Fausto Sterling. She basically said, look, if you actually examine the biological evidence, chromosomes, hormones, genitals, the simple male/female binary just doesn't hold up. She identified at least 5 distinct biological sexes, including several intersex variations. The point is, our simple 2-box system is a choice we made. It's not the full story nature is telling us. And to really hammer this home, he points to our genetics. We are obsessed with a difference that makes up less than 1% of our DNA. Think about that. We build our entire social worlds, our identities, our inequalities, all on this tiny sliver of difference, while we completely ignore the 99% that makes us the same. He says that's a social decision, not a biological one. This is a heavy one, but it's so important. What does he mean? Well, he's arguing that we grab onto these labels. I'm straight, I'm a man, I'm a woman, because they make us feel safe and certain. But that certainty comes at a cost. We're using the label to escape from the terrifying but also totally liberating freedom of a life that's more fluid and undefined. Okay, so if normal is a trap and our identities are illusions, where does that leave us? What's the alternative? Well, this final part of the explainer is all about the author's vision for a totally new way to think about sex, dating, and how we connect with each other. This leads to his idea of growing sideways. You know how our culture has this one vertical path for life? This ladder you're supposed to climb toward marriage and kids? The author says, forget the ladder. Instead, we can grow sideways. We can explore all these other paths based on what we actually want and need, without feeling like we're falling behind. So this way of thinking leads to some really specific and, pretty unconventional dating advice. He says, have sex sooner so you know if you're compatible. Don't just break up. Learn to renegotiate the relationship. Make sure you have a life and friends before you start dating. Embrace the internet. And, most importantly, remember that marriage doesn't have to be the end goal of every single relationship. And this is the powerful idea the author wants to leave us with. He's suggesting we've had it all wrong. Maybe the goal of a healthy sex life isn't to fit into some box called normal. Maybe, just maybe, it's a personal rebellion. A rebellion against the limits we've put on ourselves so we can finally explore what's possible and build a life that is truly, authentically our own.